Hello, everyone. We're going to get started. I'm Cindy Cohen, and I direct the program in Peace Building in the Arts here at Brandeis at the International Center for Ethics, Justice, and Public Life. And put my glasses on. On behalf of DEIS Impact and the Office of the President and the Student Support Services Program, Brandeis Posse, and the minor in Creativity, the Arts, and Social Transformation, I'm thrilled to welcome you to Freedom Underfoot, a keynote performance of DEIS Impact. I'm quite sure by the end of this performance you'll agree with me that we really have a privilege today of witnessing a powerhouse of three artists. One is Germaine Ingram, an award-winning tap dancer, choreographer, songwriter, and vocal and dance improviser who composed the piece we were about to see for Atlanta's 150-year commemoration of the Battle of Atlanta, a turning point in the Civil War. I am so proud to introduce her to the Brandeis community as a champion of social justice, an artist of great vision, a lawyer, and a public intellectual whose presence here over the next few days is inevitably going to challenge us to think and feel in new ways about historical memory, about race and racism, about social transformation, and about the arts. She's accompanied today by Dr. Jacqueline Pickett, an instructor of double bass at Columbus State University, a performer in symphonies and chamber orchestras, and the founder of a nonprofit that promotes formal music instruction and social empowerment for youth at risk, and also the Metro Atlanta Women's Jazz Society. And also accompanied by Diane Monroe, a violinist who has dazzled audiences around the world with her virtuosity in both classical and jazz genres. She has performed with many jazz greats, including the legendary drummer Max Roach, but that's just the first name in a list so far too long for us to discuss here. She also leads her own quartet and has performed at the Kennedy Center, among other venues. Diane arranged the work that we will witness today based on Germaine's composition. About today, in a moment, when I finish the introduction, we'll witness this performance, and as soon as the artists have caught their collective breaths, we'll begin a discussion and response and Q&A time. At 3:20 or so, which is very soon after we start, we'll take a break in case there are people here that need to leave for 3:30 classes or other commitments. And then everyone who doesn't need to go is welcome to stay and join the students in the Introduction to Cast course to engage in conversation with the artists until 4:30. If you haven't had enough today, you can go to the, please join us actually in the keynote presentation that Germaine will be giving tomorrow evening, accompanied by Diane at 7:30 here in this space, which is one of the few spaces on campus, and maybe the only one that's really suitable for tap dance, we discovered. In the work of social transformation, one of the major challenges we face is how to address painful history. Students in CAST, the Intro to CAST course, are taking up a question raised by the Indian activist and poet Amar Kanwar. What is the vocabulary of the language that allows us to see, know, understand, and remember historical and contemporary crime? This question is one of the questions that we'll engage with after we see this performance. So please please join me in welcoming Germaine and Diane and Jackie, who will be entertaining us and informing us and nourishing us in just a moment.
Uncle Billy's blue case rained down on the town with the force of a biblical plague. Not a structure was spared, every family despaired. The scorched path that they made. Toussaint Louverture rallied the blacks to deliver the Minke from bondage. All the white people fled, except the ones who were dead. 'Twas collateral damage. Show me your Moses and I'll tell you who you are. Claimed an old Jerusalem rabbi. Johnny Rebs called Sherman Satan, but he looked like Moses to me. John Brown's body would hang from the gallows. He murdered to set black folk free. Some proclaimed him insane, others spat on his name. An enigma was he. Show me your Moses and I'll tell you who you are. Claimed an old Jerusalem rabbi. Johnny Rebs called Sherman Satan, but he looked like Moses to me. Moral codes get ripped and shattered. Winning trumps, not much else matters. Toys turn of mass destruction, no concern for what comes after. Sister Sojourner covered the land with a message that change gonna come. When some questioned her sex, she replied with her breast, asking, ain't I a woman? General Harriet traveled the Underground Railroad again and again. First a family she led, then more hundreds she sped out of slavery's den. Show me your Moses and I'll tell you who you are, claimed an old Jerusalem rabbi. Johnny Reb called Germaine Satan, but he looked like Moses to me. Moral codes get ripped and shattered, winning trumps, not much else matters. Tool turns, some ask disaster, no concern with what comes after. No logic, no reason. No logic, no reason. No logic, no reason. No logic, no reason. The howl of death. Each mother, each father, each child bereft. Atlanta, 1864. The railroad and the war made Atlanta, transformed it from a sleepy depot for North Georgia farmers to a bustling center of manufacturing and urban growth. And the railroad and war destroyed Atlanta. Once General Sherman moved south from Chattanooga, he could advance only toward Atlanta because that was the only place the railroad went. The northern Georgia countryside around Atlanta was depleted of crops and livestock from collapse of plantations and farms, and from being stripped by defending Confederate forces and the approaching Union Army. An estimated 35,000 Confederate soldiers were lost in the Atlanta campaign as a result of being killed, wounded, or taken prisoner. By September 1st, 1864, Atlanta was controlled by Sherman's army, and destruction of the city's transportation, manufacturing, and business infrastructure followed. In the midst of this maelstrom, women, black, white, slave, free, rich, poor, were consumed with what the radical realities of a wartime present and the even more radical possibilities of a post-war future meant for them. The war tested and reshaped their sense of place, their sense of loyalty, and their sense of self. is my world, bound in fences, got no rights, no defenses. Every day I bow and scrape to somebody's whim. In this world I'm just chattel, like a horse and its saddle. In this world I can't reveal the me that's within. Yet in this world I hear a faint voice call for the time when my life will be mine and my everydays are purposeful and free. Here's my world bound by custom, woman's place not to question, painting moral fictions on a scene that's profane. Hail the dead, soothe the dying, up to here with denying how I loathe this endless night of violence and pain. Pray God's tender mercies, offer hope for the day when the hawks fly away and when sins don't mass disperse you in war's name. I hear this world explode, I see this way of life disappear. Will I react with gladness or fear to hear this world explode? I hear this world explode, I see this way of life disappear. Will I react with gladness or fear to see this world explode, 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 explode. helpless and hollow, yell that I tugs too hard. I combs her hair, I combs her hair, most every night. In the full moon, I dreams that eyes of voodoo, and I take them falling strands and winds a trick that makes her set me free. But still, I combs her hair most every night. Gently, I ease the tangles, gently, I combs her hair. I wears her scent from chin to foot, serving all day the missing gets in my every word. I wears her scent from head to toe. Blind man to tell between us, for him be hard to know. I wears a scent, I wears a scent from head to toe. When I be with my man, he treats me cold. He turn his head away and say, I smell like Massa Hound Dog on a stormy day. I scrub my limbs till knuckles fray. But Mississippi, no Mississippi, don't go away. I knows her thoughts before she speak. Little she knows her secrets are mine to keep. I knows her whims, and I knows her moves. I act like the things she tells me, pretend that they're all is news. I knows her thoughts, I knows her thoughts. Before she speak, I can see in her dreams, I knows her schemes, just 'cause I slow to speak. Don't mean my mind is weak. They say I should be glad she favors me, but I'd rather be a stray dog and be free. I'd rather be a dog without bones I'd rather be a hound without a home. I gotta be free. I'm gonna be free. My job was taking care of the white children up at the big house. And I also had to feed the little Negro children. I remember quite well how those poor little children used to have to eat. They were fed in boxes and troughs under the house. They were fed cornmeal, mush, and beans. When this was poured into their box, they would gather around it the same as we see pigs and horses and cattle gather around troughs. Octavia George. Other people's children mean more than my own. I care for other people's children while mine's be alone. When the sting of that hit me, my weary heart just moaned. Other people's children can suck my loving dry. What's am I to tell them when her pigs ask her why? She be gone when they're hurting, and on this sick bed. Lord, have pity on my sins and relieve my pain and guilt for neglecting my close skin, and deliver me, sweet Jesus, from this trick bag I'm suffering. My husband, Julius Leach, was a member of the 44th U.S. Colored Infantry. He had only been about a month in the service when he was killed. My master knew about my husband enlisting before I did. From that time, he treated me more cruelly than ever, whipping me frequently without any cause, and insulting me on every occasion. The last whipping he gave me, he took me into the kitchen and whipped me most unmercifully until my back was lacerated all over, the blood oozing out in several places so that I could not wear my underclothes without them becoming saturated with blood. He said, "When I am done with you tomorrow, you never will live no more." I knew he could carry out his threats, so that night, about 10 o'clock, I took my babe and ran away. I have 5 children. I left them all with my master except the youngest. I want to get them, but I dare not go back near my master. My master is a rebel sympathizer. Patsy Leash. Broken heart, but freedom. Touch my mother's tender cheek, hold my rascal baby's knee. Or write myself a destiny that takes me God knows where. Strut my head strong ways, spend each day in shadows. Where's the justice in a world that makes a prideful Negro choose between hearth and wretched cave, between fugitive and slave? All mankind yield to nature, and all mankind yield to fate, and all mankind yield to powers yon he can. All mankind yield to ashes when Peter stepped to the gate. And all men yield to God's judgment in the end. And all men yield to God's judgment in the end. Some folk, I say, some folk, I say, some folk do so much more. Just 'cause we's wrapped in dusky skin, waiting for a sign, listening for the answer. Here's the crossroad, light the way, give me courage to obey. To run a course unknown. Or eat my pride. And stay. This war is teaching us many things. Dyeing yarn, spinning, and weaving are no longer unknown mysteries to me. My ambition is to have a black watered silk dress trimmed with black thread lace. Think of it. How shall I feel when I pull off my russet yarn spun and woven on the plantation and bedeck myself with that style? It seems so long since I wore a silk dress that I begin to doubt if I ever owned one. missing something who means nothing more to me than land or money. Who miss her? There is nothing left for me to miss her. Her fingers through my hair, her steady hand no longer there, her dainty stitches at my hem, so easily replaced by any wench. Didn't I dress her like a darky china doll? Didn't I feed her like a pet? Didn't I raise her from the tender age of 10? Didn't I see her needs were met? Didn't I teach her how to curtsy and to serve? Didn't she sleep beside my door? Didn't I show her off to visitors and friends? How could a slave have wanted more? Didn't I show her off to relatives so dear? Couldn't she walk the lands alone? Didn't I pledge her to a relative so that she'd always have a home? So her servitude would be kind and gentle long after I'm gone, until her days are done. Who needs her when the silly flight is done? Who'll need her? That all are destined to be free, and she'll be Southern belle. I had perfumed shoulders and breasts that swell. Now my dress is tattered and my armpits smell. It's all in the name of cause. Haven't seen my husband in a score of months. He's dead or alive on the Confederate front. Now you can see that I'm the dog that hunts. It's all in the name of cause. The cause takes our men and the cause steals our young. The cause claims our land, sets our slaves on the run. The cause leaves us hungry, the cause makes us poor. The cause makes us tremble at each tap at the door. The cause has us sleepless, the cause makes us old. The cause turns us mourners for numbers untold. The cause tests our honor, the cause strains our will. The cause makes us wonder if we're Georgia Bell still. I won't pretend to be a fan of war while the losses keep mounting up more and more. I've begun to question what it all is for. What's my stake in the name? My stake in the name. What's my stake in the name? Shabba-da-doo-da, shabba-da-doo-da, shabba-da-da-da-doo-da, dooby-dooby-wah. Of the cause. When I remember all the true-hearted, the light-hearted, the gay and gallant boys who have come laughing, singing, and dancing in my way in the 3 years now past, how I've looked in their brave young eyes and helped them as I could in every way, and then saw them no more forever, how they lie stark and cold, dead upon the battlefield or moldering away in hospitals or prisons, which is worse. I think if I consider the long array of these bright youths and loyal men who have gone to their death almost before my very eyes, my heart might break too. Is anything worth it? This fearful sacrifice, this awful penalty we pay for war. Kizzy's way, it seems just fine for Negroes. Pain rolls down her back like midday sweat. Puddles between her toes, rises to her knees, floods up to her nose. But Kizzy doesn't drown in all the sorrow. Somehow she endures to face each morrow. Kizzy's way, it wears so well on black folk. Plowing sways her back like puzzle mule. rays of sun, parch her skin to hide, fry her head to straw. But Kissy doesn't break beneath the weight. She accepts the God-ordained this fate. No, this wasn't the deal. No, this wasn't the life I planned for. I was made for genteel, never fit for what God made man for. What's a woman become when she's forced in the role of master? How she walk in the world has been marked by this whole disaster. And what comes after this mad disaster? The death and destruction, my world's reduction. Kisses way is natural for slave girls. Makes her kids believe her belly's full. While Miss Mill turns a knot deep inside her gut, smiles deny her pain, but Kissy's fragile parts do not betray how it aches to do it Kissy's way. I was glad to see the Union Army come. But General Sherman and his soldiers weren't no friends to the Negro. I heard a Yankee soldier say that they hated the Negro race and that they would as soon shoot a Negro as a dog. They destroyed our houses just like they did the white folks, and they stole us clean out. They were like hungry wolves that didn't even say howdy. They picked out the strongest slave men and take them away with them to do the hard labor. I didn't know whether to stay put or follow Sherman and his men as they marched south towards Savannah. They didn't want no women, children, and old folks slowing them down. Sometimes they just left the women and children, the old and the weak, to fend for themselves. Some of them died on the road. Freedom sure don't come for free. believe these feet can just stand still, or walk or run, or fly or dance wherever legs can move through. Can I believe these hands can rock the cradle of my own dear babe? Can I believe this voice can sing my own blue song? Can I believe this body can be mine to give or to withhold? Of keloid scars, of ages and ages of betrayal and anguish. Can I believe? Can I believe? Can I believe? This war was not a war as adventure, nor a war for a solemn cause. It was a war at its purest, a mindless mass rage severed from any cause, ideal or moral principle. It was as if God had decreed this characterless entanglement of brainless forces as his answer to human presumption. E.L. Doctorow. If we ought to forget a war which has filled our land with widows and orphans, which has made stumps of men of the very flower of their youth, and sent them on the journey of lifeless, armless, legless, maimed, and mutilated, which has piled up a debt heavier than a mountain of gold, swept uncounted thousands of men into bloody graves, and planted agony at 1,000,000 heartstones. I say that if this war is to be forgotten, I ask, in the name of all things sacred, what shall men remember? Frederick Douglass. No logic, no reason,
You're breathing. Okay. She said we had to wait till she could breathe. So we have just a few minutes now, and I was thinking about starting off with a question, and then I'll see if any folks here have a question. You know, as you know, James Baldwin has written that the imperative of the artist is to find the new questions that are inside.
To lay bare the questions that are covered over by the answers.
To lay bare the questions that are covered over by the answers. Thank you. And so I'm wondering, what are the answers that you were asking questions of? And also, in this process of bringing these very powerful words and sounds and movements through your body, what new questions, what new answers have you been discovering?
I don't know that I found any answers. My work is always about my curiosity about questions, and most of the time that curiosity just, the work just leads me to more questions. But, some of the fundamental questions that drive this work, what are the internal voices of women and African people in the context of this horrific war? It's only been relatively recently that that people like Drew Gilpin-Faust has written about women in the Civil War, and written about things that were not just military campaigns, written about what it was like on the home front. And she even ventures the ventures the opinion that the South, one of the reasons that the South lost the war is that women began to withdraw from the role that they had been given to be sort of the moral standards for the war. It was their responsibility to keep up the morale of the men in the fields and give proper burials and memorials to the men whose bodies were being returned to their communities. And by the time that by 1864, women were beginning to say, this wasn't the deal. You know, this is just too costly, and what are we fighting for anyway? And so as they began to kind of, sort of give up that allegiance to the cause, that and other things led to the vigor of the Confederate campaign falling apart. So it's trying to imagine what those women felt, and especially imagine what women of color felt, because we have diaries of white women who were in the South. I mean, more and more are being uncovered, but we don't have very much except for the slave narratives of what African American women were thinking. So I have to, as Toni Morrison says, it's my responsibility as an artist to engage in imagination, to open up those questions.
Diane or Jackie, would you like to answer?
She said it all.
I'm going to ask, what was the question again? Right.
Just what are the new awarenesses that have come to you as you've worked with these words and sounds in creating the performance and working together and facing and really confronting this history? What are the new questions that are emerging, or what is the new awareness for you?
I'll say new awareness, that women have always, on some level beyond the physical, have had a cohesiveness that helps them to get to where they need to go under any circumstances that are in front of them. That spiritual cohesiveness between all of these women, whether they be the people who had the outward physical appearance of privilege, or the people who were the oppressed. And Diane, what was your awareness?
Well, I'm amazed that finally we get to talk about the female aspect of what really happened, and to go through. Well, we know that I'm remembering a time in history where way before the war, when the transatlantic slave trade began or was in process, and Africans were taken everywhere, but to the Caribbean, for example, and there were these group of Africans called the Maroons. And the Maroons were from Jamaica. I mean, they went from Africa to Jamaica, and they could not be defeated. And the main reason why they could not be defeated was because women were in the front, and they were the key to the guerrilla warfare. And there was this wonderful woman who they have truths about and myths about her name was Queen Nanny. And Queen Nanny was, she scared him away. I mean, she not only did she formulate troops and guerrilla warfare, first of all, the coming from some of the mountains in Africa, there were similar mountains in Jamaica, so there's these Maroons fled to the mountains and they hid. So they hid from the English, they hid from the French, and so Queen Nanny devised methods to keep the soldiers from recapturing them. It was really something. So and the Maroons survived today because of the women. So it's really very important to sort of make a link to the feminine aspect. What would we do? What would wars be like? If if women had control or not? Right? Exactly. Yeah.
So two faces of the women as the warrior and the woman as the one who's just worn out from war. Yeah. One more question maybe before we take a break?
I have a question, general, for the audience.
Okay, great.
Would anyone be willing to share what they were feeling when they heard some of these songs? Would anyone be feeling that? I mean, what were your general feelings as you were listening to this?
So just one piece that I specifically connect with was the piece of the white woman who lost her slave and how she truly thought she was right in how she treated her and how she expected she would have no emotional connection and was kind of going through this shock in her brain as if she doesn't mean anything, it's like money or property, why do I care? And then thinking about how potentially she was missing something like a daughter or like her own connections. And what I loved was that it was done from the white woman's perspective, but not in a traditional way. It shocked you and it surprised you. Because I would have expected that most of what you would have done would have been from the slave or the African-American perspective. And so I love that that's in there, but it surprises us and it challenges us as to not seeing, slave owners equal bad and slaves fighting for freedom equals good. But there's an element there of surprise and of confusion. And I really was, when that piece came on, I really appreciated it. So, thank you.
Anyone else want to answer that question?
For me, it was very powerful. I felt a lot of times very conflicted as to how to feel. I think specifically on the dance piece, there's a lot of emotion. There's a lot of feelings that come up when the music is it's driven and the movements are there. I felt that was very powerful. Sorry, and I guess a question that I thought about was. There's a lot of feelings of just sadness, I think, that came up to me and sorrow just because there's, they're very real. The stories are very real, and I think the way they're told it's also very real. And I felt, I'm just wondering how bringing back these stories today, how could they also affect or impact other situations that might be happening right now. And I don't know if that makes a lot of sense, but I guess that's kind of like a question that arose for me. How can we use this and bring those specific stories in that context into perhaps situations right now that are happening?
I don't know that I can make a direct link, except to try to use this as an example of how performance can undermine a single story, can open up empathy, can invite people into my curiosity, the areas where I am curious. I've done, when we went to Atlanta, I said, how are people going to respond to this, this woman from Philadelphia coming down there and singing to them about their history? But I think that audiences respond because they understand that I'm coming from a place of curiosity. That I'm not trying to educate them, but I'm trying to invite them into my questions and encourage them to go away with their own questions. That's how I approach this work. Tomorrow, when I give the lecture, I'll relate how Oni Song, the first time I performed Oni Song, it was done in the context of a piece about the President's House in Philadelphia, the first White House in the country. It was the residence and executive offices of the Washingtons. And at the end of the show, a 7-year-old came to me and said, I have a question for you. Do you think that Oni and Martha could be friends? And I thought that was such a profound question for a 7-year-old to ask. And I chose to take it as her appreciation of the fact that there are certain institutions like slavery that are so corrupting that they distort, that they undermine the natural instincts for caring and love. And so it was a real encouragement to me that these pieces, these songs, the 7-year-old can take that away, then maybe I'm onto something.
So I think that we need to pause here, and I think it's a good place to pause, actually, that you've invited us into your curiosity, and I'm sure that people will leave with many questions. And you're welcome to stay. We'll take a short break and we'll continue the conversation. And you're welcome to come back tomorrow evening at 7:30 to hear what will be a very powerful address. So I guess I'd like to ask you again to join me in thanking these women for one of the things the arts can do is help us face history that's otherwise too painful to face. And I think this was a just incredibly powerful and beautiful example. Thank you so much for the work that you did to bring this to us. Thank you very much. Jen Lagaspada is a senior, and she's the teaching assistant for the class, Cast 150B, and a Cast minor. And students in CAST have been asked to think ahead of time about questions they would like to ask, and Jen has reviewed those and organized them a bit. So she's going to start off, and then there'll be still time for students for you to ask more questions and for others to ask questions as well. And we're also happy to receive questions from you. Okay, so Jen.
Great, thank you, Professor Cohen. So, like I said, like Professor Cohen said, I'm the teaching assistant, and so I have a couple of questions for you that the students submitted earlier. And a couple of them have to do with the content, and so they're specifically for you, Germaine, about what was the process like of collecting, the materials, the narratives to try to create these songs, what kind of came first, in the musical stylings or the material, the idea?
Well, I do extensive research. And for me, everything, this was research. Performance is research. And so, I do extensive library research. In fact, research can crowd out the making because it's so easy to just keep researching until you just force yourself. Okay, now I gotta make something, and having a deadline really helps to move it along. But some of this material, as I was saying, goes back to a project that I did about the practice of slavery at the president's house, and so this is my work is about imagining the internal lives of the people who had no voices. So the research, the work is about sort of looking at the context from multiple perspectives and trying to imagine, so what was it like for Oni to be the body servant of the most revered woman in the United States? What was that tension between pride and frustration and anger and resentment, and how did she negotiate that? Who Needs Her was, I wrote that when approaching the show in Atlanta, and I really wanted it to be about, not just women of color. And I did some work on free women of color and women who were wealthy women, plantation owners. There were lots of very poor white women who were doing as badly, if not worse, than some of the slaves. It's sort of looking at that whole reservoir of information and trying to figure out. So, how do I bring a new internal story to people? And that's, the first time I sang Who Needs Her for a composer friend, he said, "That's a love song." I said, that's exactly right. And it's a love song, but it represents the perversity, the perverse form that love can take when it's ensconced in a culture ridden with slavery.
And the decision to kind of incorporate the stories of white women, how did that process of elimination work? How did you decide whose stories to include, whose stories to remain out?
Yeah, actually for this performance, I took out some that, in the interest of time and just sort of coherence. It mostly, I had a sense of, what I wanted the arc of the piece to be. And so one consideration was how the excerpts, fit into that arc. But it also had to do with sort of the poetry. The poetry that I found in the writing. Some of the diaries are just wonderfully poetic, and others are incredibly mundane. So,
as most diaries are.
So it really had to do with the poetry and the ability to sort of capture in a paragraph intense feeling.
Thank you. The other questions that the students had were more about your personal life and your transition from being a civil rights lawyer, correct? And to transition from that to this performance aspect, and how much of
your old career do you bring into this new career?
Well, I did a lot of things in the law. I was a lawyer for 30 years, and I did a lot of different things. So, you know, I was a law teacher at 2 law schools. I was a legal services attorney doing employment discrimination litigation. I did aviation litigation and personal injury litigation at a firm. I was general counsel and deputy superintendent for Philadelphia school system. So I get bored fast. But my entry into art was tap dance. And, you know, it was one of those things where I kind of woke up one morning and said, I want to try tap dancing. And sort of looked around Philadelphia to see whether I saw somebody who looked like and sounded like someone that, you know, I wanted to dance like. And it took a while, but eventually I found LaVon Robinson, who was a native Philadelphian, but was just then returning from Boston. This was 1980, was just returning from Boston, where he lived for several years. And someone said, you know, LaVon Robinson is teaching his master class, why don't you go? And I went and I said, that's what I want to sound like. That's the aesthetic that I'm interested in. And so I just harassed him until he agreed to teach me. And that became a 25-year relationship where I, you know, as a student and his protege and his dance partner. That was just, it was something I never expected to happen, but it also led me into doing oral history on African American women tap dancers whose, you know, lives were just invisible. I mean, these extraordinary dancers, these extraordinary performers, some of their families didn't even know how wonderful they were as performers. So there was a period of time when I was both performing and doing law. And then, like 2002, I went to the Philadelphia School District to work with a particular really extraordinary and brilliant reform superintendent. And when he got run out, I left. And so I had to make a choice at that point whether I was going to return to the regular, you know, to the regular practice of law or do something else. And at that point, there were 2 things that were happening. One was I thought I would be bored after after having the job that I had at the school district, which was the most purposeful work I'd ever done, and where I found some of the most brilliant people that I'd ever worked with. You know, much more brilliant than the law professors I worked with and the lawyers I worked with. I mean, just these incredibly brilliant, committed people. And then the other thing was I was seeing lawyers doing things that made me embarrassed to say that I was a lawyer. So I decided it was time to do something else. And so I went to Washington and worked for the Children's Defense Fund, and then came back to Philadelphia and worked for education reform places, and did a bunch of things. And then when I got old enough to get Social Security, I became a full-time lawyer. I'm a full-time artist.
That's great.
And your question about is there a link?
Yeah.
I definitely think that there is a link. I think. Well, about 3 weeks ago, I ran into a man who currently teaches clinical law at University of Pennsylvania, and he was a colleague of mine when in the 1970s, early 80s, when I was a lawyer at Legal Services in Philadelphia. And so I ran into him, and Lou said to me, he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm an artist." He said, "You always were an artist." So I think that I'm really realizing now that part of my skill as a lawyer was having a sense of narrative, having an ear for narrative. So, you know, those things, there's a continuum between what I learned as a lawyer, how you use elements to tell a truth. Not the truth, but a truth.
Someone's truth.
Yeah, a truth. And the way I try to work to find narrative now. I also think that as a lawyer, I learned something, I learned a lot about process that has relevance for the way I work as an artist now. I mean, my clients used to come to me, and I said, "Okay, so what do you want out of this?" And they said, "I want justice." I said, "Well, I'm only a lawyer. I don't know that I can bring you justice. I know a lot about good process, and really, I mean, and I didn't say I don't say that about process in a disparaging way. Good process is a beautiful thing, and so that's where I thought I was. I'm not even sure what justice is sometimes, but I can get a handle on good process, and I think I bring that to art as well, especially in collaborative projects. Mm-hmm. How to create spaces where for building trust, for building accessibility, for building reciprocity, especially at a time when there's so much emphasis on authorship and outcomes. How do we keep that space open, that generative space open?
And how do you think that, you talked a little bit about the process, how do you think that oral histories contribute to, or can contribute to, justice, or to bringing the processes of people's lives out?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think there's nothing more powerful than hearing people speak their own truths. To the extent that we can, unmediated by the expert or the analyst or whatever. And so I think that's what oral history can do. And I think we're getting smarter and smarter. I mean, Dr. Cohen's work is just so powerful about the role of story circles. And I'm so impressed by John O'Neill's work and Dudley Cox's work and Ping Chong's work. Just the various different ways that they embrace oral history, embrace people's real voices, and help to construct them in a way that people can hear, even when even in very difficult, conflictual situations. I mean, that's a real gift.
Yeah. Thank you. I'd like to open the floor now for any questions from the audience.
So I think the piece is really powerful, and also how the process is very intense, the research, and kind of putting yourself in that situation, in that narrative. So my question is, how do you balance that emotion within yourself? As artists, how do you balance that tension, that kind of strong, intense emotion, and how do you process that within yourself? Do you find reconciliation, or how do you deal with that emotion?
Yeah, I feel, the artists that I appreciate most bring a kind of vulnerability to the stage. So the challenge for me is not containment. The challenge for me is bringing my full self, my full presence to the stage. At the risk of errors and going off the page. But I think that's what we owe. I think that's what we owe audiences. I'm asking audiences to lean forward. I never say to an audience, sit back. I say, don't you dare sit back. So if that's what I'm asking audiences to do, then I have to be, just fully present. And if being fully present means that, I lose, I cross that barrier, then that's okay.
In the back?
Thank you. I thought the performance was tremendously powerful, and I had an opportunity to talk to Dr. Pickett at the break because I was very interested in her instrument. Mm-hmm. And I think that the accompaniment added so much to the performance. I was wondering in the creative process where the instrumentation came in. Did it come in as you were creating the writing, or did it come in later, or was it a joint collaboration? Because it felt so right with what you were saying.
Well, we wanted to keep it really spare. I really love, first of all, economically, it helps. Economics controls a lot of stuff, and then you find a reason, an aesthetic reason, to be economical. But because we did consider bringing other instruments into this, and then just really decided that sort of the spareness of this worked really well, and so. The orchestration is really sort of Diane's, I would go to her with lyrics and a melody, and she said, maybe this should be a 7/4, or and it keeps changing. It was changing 10 minutes before performance.
Well, that's an act, but yes. There's, yeah, it's fun. Yeah, I feel so happy and so blessed to be a part of this. And one of the challenges is one aspect of the so-called orchestration, and that's the improvisation, the improvisatory. And the fact that it's small, and the fact that one can be free enough to make a last-minute decision about something that's going to be a foundation for being more free. Does that make sense? Okay. That's one aspect. The other aspect is that we actually are co-collaborators or co-composers, as Germaine is the center is Germaine because this is her idea, this is her passion, and this is her expression, you know, and she, you know, came to me. So, so she writes the lyric, which is the verbiage, and then there's the melody, which is the one line that goes through. Now, melody is one aspect of a composition, and so the other aspects I participated in. I have to do the harmonies. I have to figure out what I'm hearing. If I hear something in the melody, you can go many ways. Okay, so the fixed part is basically fixed unless I decide to change it, just like I mean, seriously, because if I'm writing composition and it's my expression, my verbiage or not, or just an instrumental, it's the same thing. I have a piece, you know, with melody, harmony, rhythm, form. And then I will, so that's that. But if I decide to change melody, harmony, okay, I'll change the harmony, then it becomes a different work, right? But it's still mine because I just put that in. So all of the elements have to be there, okay? So so we have, now we have Germaine's lyrics and Germaine's melody and Germaine's rhythms in some instances, and also her bass lines. Sometimes she feels there are a few pieces that we didn't play, which have her bass lines, and there's one piece, or maybe two, I can't remember. Yeah, two, that she had the bass lines of our Can I Believe, the two of us when we do our thing, and the rhythm aspect. And we do the Moses, Looks Like Moses, was the beginning, habanera, and at the end was the same kind of the bass line, basically not the actual bass line, but the feel, And so there's so many aspects, and there's subtle aspects and all that kind of stuff, But yes, the harmony, rhythm, and orchestration. And the orchestration is the thing that changes with every instrumentation. Yeah. And because it's such a small, sparse group, we there's always room for change. I mean, I seriously hear this with a larger situation. I'm hearing all the harmonies. I have to hear in order to select, And so because Germaine's, mostly, not musically, but mostly just passionately. I feel what she feels, and so it helps me. That helps in the feeling. Helps me to put these harmonies in place, and I just it's amazing. I can hear many things, and it moves me so that I have to do it. So it's like we're one in that aspect. And I feel that very much, and I hope she feels it too.
No, I definitely do. I mean, I love the fact that this stuff isn't set, that we keep hearing new things in this work, and I'm so glad that Diane brought up the improvisational part. I mean, this improvisation is really key to this work, not just as a strategy. I mean, Improvisation is a way of living, and so working together as we do, it's using it's using improvisation as a way of relating, as a way of sharing this story with one another and sharing the story with other people, and also kind of showing a kind of vulnerability, because we have to listen intensely. We have to listen intensely to one another in order to create that free space, in order to create that open space. Yeah.
You want me to say something? Okay. Wow. Diane and Germaine practice in Philadelphia, and then I come up from Atlanta principally because Diane and I have known each other for a couple of decades. Yeah. And we worked together in a contemporary music group before in Atlanta. Yeah, Thammers. Yes. Yeah. Exactly. And we both, well, playing this type of chamber, would you call it chamber music? Could we call it chamber music? Okay, we're going to call it chamber music. Is a little bit, it's a lot different because it still has tonality in it, so it's still kind of like Western classical music. But there was a very nice compliment from a woman. I'm assuming she's from a Middle Eastern country. I don't know if she's still here. But she said something about the instrument representing a Middle Eastern instrument. And the technology that allows a double bass that's actually supposed to be an acoustic double bass. And since it's a little difficult flying, you have that stick version, but it's a stick version with a chip in it that mimics a double bass. So what I'm trying to say, to make a long story short, technology has allowed some different sounds to be able to evolve. Maybe more of a type of a blending of different cultures and different aspects of music performance. Certainly the improvisation and knowing certain forms. We weren't just up there just playing what we felt like playing, but it was an exercise, sort of the master class that Diane did yesterday at Longy, and Germaine gave some exercises from a woman that we have all worked with, Pauline Oliveros, and it was in deep listening. It's called her philosophy of really listening to one note of music and seeing what all is in that sound, that universal sound. And when Diane was talking about orchestration, she can hear the whole ensemble, a bigger set of harmonies and melodies. It comes out in the rehearsals. Dr. Cohen was listening yesterday to us rehearsing. I was wondering, what is she thinking? She's probably thinking, because she's hired them to come up here. But because we would stop constantly and make changes, and I'm sure, being in that that position of a professor, and the performance is tomorrow. It's like, don't worry. But so the rehearsal is a lot of stop and go, and it's just to pique one's awareness, but it's also just the whole idea of being in sync with each other. So that is an aspect of putting a piece like this together. You have to have a firm foundation in form, and Germaine just has this natural gift, like the comment that your coworker said you were always an artist. I said, oh, that's so true. It's very sweet, but it's so true, because,
I chose not to think he was saying you were a bad lawyer, so you so you just as well be an artist.
But it's really refreshing to work with a situation where you can be spontaneous and you can be vulnerable. That's part of the performance. And you're also taking on the personal responsibility of bringing that spiritual aspect into a presence. I hope you could feel the women, feel their presence as we were recreating their stories, or the fictitious perspectives of compiling different stories of different women into one person. I mean, you said you took some of the narratives from different aspects, but overall, it was my hope that you felt their lives and how they resonate, how they match up with you in some way, and that you take something from this that will make you more effective as someone who can transform conflict, who can create peace. I truly meant my side comment is this, like, if women, just the natural nurturing energy, maybe we'd have a lot less war. I mean, there certainly are women warriors, but it's that we all need to take that energy and learn how to get along with each other. And art is an aspect of tapping in to that, and that's wonderful. But the process of the sparseness, getting back to the musical aspect of the question, it allows space, hopefully, for that synergy, that back and forth between the performance and the audience to really reflect on the bigger picture. And hopefully you'll take that with you, and maybe in this future situation when someone cuts you off in traffic, you might have a different perspective than road rage. I mean, those are pragmatic things that it would be nice to move forward, because one act of kindness, paying it forward, is really quite a lovely thing, and we can have a world that is a lot less different when we feel empowered instead of hopeless.
I have a question. Yeah, go ahead. This is the first time we used projections, used archival photographs, and I was wondering what your reaction was to that. I always approach using projections with some trepidation, and so I was wondering whether that helped, or whether it interfered with your ability to bring your own imagination to the songs.
So I just want to thank you again for coming. I think the archives definitely brought a level of authenticity, and just the music with the dance, all of it mixed together was very well thought out and performed. And me personally, I just wanted to know who these people were, and how did you find them? That's my curiosity is, what effect, when looking through these archives, what stood out about them that you chose those in particular?
Those particular images?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the music had been written in as many hours on the Smithsonian site, looking for images that that help to illustrate the lyrics. I mean, that was essentially it. It took a lot of time, and I had a trove of archival photographs, and then narrowed it down to about a dozen.
Was there a response to the projection question? Yes.
I thought they really added to it. It helped create a realistic image in my mind, rather like mixing that with story was really helpful for me. So I really liked it.
Okay, thank you.
I could also respond. Excuse me. I got, as the performance went on, I got a clear sense that it really was storytelling, and as you said, oral history. And once I understood what was going on, the images really helped. And I don't know if it's just for aged ears, and I include myself in this. I felt myself almost wishing that the words were there as well, because I felt the curiosity, I shared the curiosity, and I wanted to. I felt like the lyric was really essential to the experience I wanted to have. I struggled with that a little bit. Relatedly, I just wanted to say that as I was realizing that this was oral history and storytelling, another thing came together for me as well. Not sure, curious whether it was intended. It was almost a sense of you were conjuring the presence of these women. And the remarks that you made earlier,
Diane?
about the spiritual, yes. Well, I'm actually thinking of you, maybe both of you, about the spiritual, the intended effect of bringing the presence of these historical, living historical beings to the stage. There was almost a sense of conjuring moments, maybe of trance-like feeling with the rhythms and the movements. And I was wondering if that was intended.
Oh my God. You want to? Well, no, go ahead.
Sure.
Go.
Short story, yes.
Yes. Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's inherent in the African tradition, in the West African tradition, especially in the culture, that we have the root of the music, like Yoruban music, and that's really the heart of what was taken and brought to America was ritual. It was with music and dance. It was dance and music did not they weren't separate, really. And of course religion, Yoruba religion, but that was the whole thing. And I think that we don't really we've lost that history of that connection of where that came from and how it just still sustains itself today in the rhythms. And I'm sorry.
No. There's one form that exists in the United States today that you can see right now: Hawaiian music, traditional Hawaiian music. It's with the dance movement telling the story and conjuring up the spirits. So.
Yeah. Well, yeah, which is also in most cultures have relationships to dance, to movement and music. We were just talking about that in the class yesterday. As a matter of fact, one of our the strongest points was music is movement, and movement is music, and you can. It's fascinating to play when Germaine is dancing. It's like it enhances the whole aspect of movement. We as musicians have a goal. We're in motion. And so we're moving. Every phrase moves. And to see it, physically, is very fascinating to make that connection. And most cultures of the world make that connection.
The only thing I would add to that is, sort of beyond the spiritual realm, I wanted each song to be a story. In fact, I at one point I said I was going to challenge myself not to use any text, to have everything told through song. So it's really important to me to embody through the music, through the lyrics, through the body, the people whose lives that I was trying to portray. And so, and that way there was a kind of conjuring. And I wanted to find that sort of specificity that would make it real and present for people.
Thank you so much for the great performance. It was really mindful and strong and professional. So my question is that what was your challenges the first time that you wanted to perform and express your voice? What kind of internal voices you have as a woman with yourself that you are not good enough, you cannot be successful, and if so, how you overcome that internal challenges, and also if there was any outside institution that doesn't let you to perform or is not happy for the performance and the mission that you have or you set for yourself.
You want to just say in 2 sentences the background that gives rise to that question?
So I'm come from Middle East. I'm international student. I'm from Iran. So I want to see if you have any freedom of speech or you doesn't have that freedom of speech to express yourself as a woman.
Yeah, that was kind of interesting because sitting here in Massachusetts and talking about conjuring, I so much wanted to say something about Wiccan culture, and I just didn't do it. But that is another cultural practice that was apparently so powerful that there were trials in this state that murdered a lot of people for a belief of that connection with nature. And I just didn't know if it was appropriate or not to mention, but so yeah, it was quite a while ago. But still, there is sort of there is a self-censorship, and that's just it takes a long time to work through oppression. Oppression is a very, very powerful tool. And I guess for me, I just say it's powerful and it's scary to take a step forward. But it's also, once you take that step forward, it makes it a little easier to take the next step. But I'm not going to say it's not scary. It has to be something that you recognize that it is, and it's there, and then you go forward, and then you look for comrade, you look for others that share the same vision that you share, and that's what makes the strength. And that's why gatherings like these are very nice, because you find those comrades.
I guess I'd say 2 things to try to answer your question. One is that getting older helps you find courage to do things. I mean, I do, I'm crowding 70, and so, I will do things now that I wouldn't have done, that I wouldn't have done 30 years ago. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful for that. So I'm less afraid of making a fool of myself than I used to be. The other thing I would say is that, and we're going to talk about it in this whole idea of not knowing. and the power of not knowing. I mean, and the visual artist Anne Hamilton has, this wonderful essay about knowing, and not knowing is not ignorance. It takes great rigor, and it takes creating situations of trust, but being willing to do the hard work, and then step off into something where you don't know what the end result is going to be. It's that kind of vulnerability that I think often makes great art. And so, I mean, those are the things that have worked for me, because yeah, you're right. It's especially in tap. I mean, the notion that it's a man's art form. And that's still prevalent, despite the fact that there are extraordinary women tap dancers. The fact that tap dance is still this, sort of fraught art form. People still think of it as a denigration. And there's sort of there is still this notion that tap dancing is doing something that self-respecting Black folk don't do. So those are things to be overcome. Some years ago when Scottsboro Boys came out, and it was shut down in New York because they used minstrelsy as the vehicle for telling this extraordinarily tragic story. I mean, I thought it was brilliant to use that as the medium. And then it came to Philadelphia, and at one of the early performances, the poet Sonia Sanchez was in the audience, and there was a talk back afterwards with a playwright and some other. It was a panel, and at some point in the talk back, Sonia stood up, and of course everybody leaned forward to hear what she had to say. And she applauded the performances, but she said that she really struggled with the use of minstrelsy as the method of telling this story. And she said, "How do you tap dance about race? How do you tap dance about death?" And I'm sitting there in the back of the audience. I said, "That's what I do." But what it said to me was that if someone who is culturally evolved as Sonia Sanchez could make that statement, then I wasn't doing enough to show the power and breadth of this art form.
Well,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Well, okay, I'll curtail my answer then.
Do we have time for a couple more questions or a comment?
We have time for you to make a comment and one question more.
Okay. Well, I think it's layered in terms of. I think it was just powerful what Germaine just said. But it's layered. I mean, it's so ingrained in us. Certain things are so ingrained in us to make us feel inferior. As artists, as women, as whatever. I mean, and the layers of anger. You peel off the layers of anger, you get to the layers of reality of being degraded and debased and debunked and destroyed, really. To not want to celebrate a part of your culture, tap dance, hoofing, you know, something that was you know, historically ours, you know, and, you know, I have friends who laugh when, you know, they talk about playing the banjo. I have black friends laughing about playing the banjo. I mean, it's just like that is a native African instrument. I mean, that's what it is. And so you don't see many black people playing. You know, the Carolina chocolate drops it's like they're new, but they're not doing anything new. I mean, they know that they're not, but a lot of people don't know that they're not. It's like, oh, the black people playing country music. Oh, wow. You know, it's like, oh, wait a minute, hold it. You know, so that there's lots. We're so twisted and so mixed up that it makes us feel, you know, these things are blocks for us to go on, to go forward.
Yeah, we need you to do whatever you need to do and to express it so that we may know ourselves better.
Beautiful, yeah. Great.
Thank you. We're actually running out of time, so we won't have time for another question, but I just wanted to say thank you so much to the three of you for engaging us and letting us into your practice. Thank you so much.
So before you leave, we just have a little present of a flyer for the DEIS Compact. And I just want to say, this is for the benefit of my students, but everyone else, that, you know, one of the key ideas we explore in creativity, art, and social transformation is this notion of a moral imagination, which we understand, based on a colleague of ours, John Paul Lederach, to be the ability to be grounded in the real world with its real suffering, its injustice, its violence, and simultaneously to work for a better world, and to a more just world, a less violent world, a more vibrant world. And he says that there are 4 disciplines to practice: to be willing to take risks and to be vulnerable, especially to be vulnerable in the face of the other. And the habit of creating space for other people's creativity, and the always keeping in the present, in the front of our mind, this idea of our interdependence with each other. And then the last one is to really be curious about the paradoxical nature of things. Even though things may seem oppositional, there's actually often a space where they can coexist and even inform each other and lead us to a deeper understanding, a deeper truth of some kind. And I just feel, I was listening to you respond to questions, how often these ideas and words were expressed in your thoughts and how much we witnessed it in your performance. So I feel like we've just gotten like a great lesson in action on the moral imagination at work. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So Jennifer is here, yes? Yes. Who's going to take our guests off so that they can take a little break before the next gig that at least Germaine is doing at 5:30. So students in the class, stay put. You guys are off to, you might want to change or grab your, whatever you need to do.